There are some great rivalries out there in the world. You've got Eaton versus Harrow in cricket. You've got Washington and Dallas in the NFL. And among the best out there is, of course, Ford versus Chevy. And I thought it would be fun today to go through each of their lineups and say, well, what I would pick at each different level. And I found something that I really didn't expect in this head-to-head. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. Before we jump into it, a couple of things. First off is, why did I decide to do this? Well, I talk about cars all the time, and I was out with some family members this weekend, and they loved it. I turned the conversation to cars. A couple of them are looking at vehicles right now, and I made a recommendation. And one of them stared at me and was like, no, I'm not going to buy a Chevy. And I realized I recommended a Chevy to someone. Now, there's a little bit of background information there. If you've been on the channel before, you know I'm kind of a Ford fan. In fact, we have 3 in our family right now, my wife, my son, and my stepson. And we've had good service from Fords for over 40 years in our family. And most of my family has owned General Motors cars at some point or another, but every single one of us has been burned by General Motors in that time, and we've all moved on to other brands. And I've made no secret on the channel that I'm kind of a fan of what GM is doing right now. They're not perfect, but I dig their exterior styling language. I dig their interior styling language. I think they're doing a great job with chassis setups and suspension setups, but I still have hesitations about engines, transmissions, and specifically some of the interior bits, whether they're really built for quality or not. But GM has crawled back up where I keep looking at them and keep considering them. And I thought it would be fun to kind of go through these 2 classic rivals at each individual section of the market and think through which I would choose or which I would recommend. And again, I found something really, really surprising here. So really what I'm doing is I'm going to open up the websites. We're going to go look at the vehicles and one by one, talk about what we would choose. So the first one, we're going to grab some low-hanging fruit here, and of course, play along. The only way this becomes fun is if you play along and think, yes, I agree with you, or no, you're an idiot, and let me know in the comments below, of course. Is the way Ford's got it organized is SUVs and cars, which means the Mustang. And if we go over here to Chevy and we look at cars, you have the Malibu. So this is really kind of the easiest choice of all of them. If you want a sporty 2-door car, well, you get the Mustang because Chevy's canceled the Camaro. But if you want a sedan, well, Chevy's the only place you go to because Ford canceled the Fusion, and none of them are offering a full lineup anymore of smaller cars and things like that. And you got to be careful here because the Malibu's being canceled and that line is being converted for the next generation Chevy Bolt. So this is an easy one here. For what it's worth, I would still choose the Mustang over a Camaro. Just kind of prefer them and their history. And if it was between the Malibu and if the Fusion was still available, that's a much harder choice for me. I really dig the Malibu, but I love the Fusion. I'm not sure which one I would choose. I'm leaning Fusion there. But let's move on to SUVs. And this becomes a little bit unfair as well. If we move to SUVs, well, Ford starts, their smallest is the Escape. They got rid of the EcoSport. So really, if you want the smaller SUVs, you've got the Trax and the Trailblazer from Chevy that you can go pick up. And of course, we're doing this only looking at these 2 manufacturers. It's not fair to say, oh, I'd just go over here and buy a Toyota or a Honda. We're just focusing on these 2 right now, right? And of the 2, I really dislike the Trailblazer. I've said I love the Trax. I'm not sure about that 1.3 liter engine, and I'm not sure about the durability of something built in GM Korea, but I love the Trax. I think it's an absolute home run of a vehicle. Exterior, interior, size, space utilization, everything about it except that engine. I really, really dig it. In fact, I did a whole video that if my car was suddenly totaled and the insurance company said, here's a check and I've got to have something tomorrow, I'd just go to a Chevy dealer and pick up a Trax and then take my chances. But the Trailblazer, I don't see the point of it. It's slightly bigger, it's heavier, a little bit bigger engine. I don't really like it. And I don't know, doesn't do it for me. But that moves us up the next price ladder here to the Equinox at $26,600, and there's a new Equinox coming, which I think looks fantastic. And over here at Ford, we've got the Escape starting at just about $29,500. Now, I dig the Escape. I think it's boring looking. And inside, it's got a cheap interior. And it feels, even if it's well equipped, it always feels just a little, ever so slightly down market to me. But when I've driven them, I really like this car. It's the kind of car I could see buying, and as long as I'm not trying to pretend it's nicer than it is, as long as I'm not using it as a status symbol, I think it would be perfectly adequate. But I dig the Equinox. I really do, and especially the new one. If it was between the current Equinox and the Escape, I'd probably pick the Escape just because I don't think there's any pretending about what it is. But the new Equinox, from what I'm seeing, absolutely, I would pick the Equinox. So we've got to rank this up here for a Chevy win at this point. And then we're going to skip over EVs and hybrids. We might talk about them a little bit at the end here, but we're going to jump up to the Blazer. And that kind of is an orphan in all of this. It could be argued that the Blazer is supposed to compete with the Bronco, but the Bronco was brought back as a retro-styled off-road vehicle. It's a serious vehicle based on the Ford Ranger chassis. The Blazer, they brought back the name, but then they brought it back as yet another boring SUV, and I strongly dislike the Blazer. I don't really like the exterior styling. I don't like that they're using the name for this. It's not, the GM totally dropped the ball 100%. I think it's one of the biggest failures of several years now that they didn't come back with a Bronco competitor or something to stand up to the new Defender. They brought it back as this, and I really strongly dislike it. And that means that in the off-road rugged realm, GM doesn't have, in the Chevy stable here, something to compete with the Bronco. So from that perspective, it's got to be a Bronco win, hands down. I would like to say that the Bronco Sport exists out there based on the Escape. It falls into a weird category for me. It doesn't compete with the Equinox, and Chevy doesn't really have anything that competes with it directly. And even though it's a unibody, Escape-based platform, it's got a little bit of off-road chops to it. It's that active lifestyle. I dig it. I really do. I don't know that I'd choose it because you're buying image and not gas mileage, but I'm going to give Ford a win for the Bronco Sport simply because they came out with something and built a little sub-brand around Bronco. I think it's cool, but it doesn't really compete against anything here for Chevy. And that's where I'm going to stop real quick and say that was the surprise. These two manufacturers have gone head-to-head for almost a century or so, and they've always not copied each other, but opposed each other. If Ford comes out with something, Chevy has to have it too. If Chevy innovates in something, Ford's got to do it too. And I was really surprised when I started looking at these lineups how much they don't overlap anymore, how much they do have products which don't quite pigeonhole directly opposed to the other brand. And more so, it's Chevy that seems to be lagging behind. They've leapt in full force to these generic SUVs, but Ford's kind of flanked them with some more interesting stuff that's a little better styled. So after the Blazer, we move up to the Traverse. Now, I liked the old Traverse a lot, the one that was just ended, as a matter of fact. I liked it a lot. I didn't think it was class leading, certainly against like the Highlander or the new Grand Highlander or some others. And we own an older now Explorer. I really like the Explorer. In fact, I've looked at the new Explorer multiple times, and my wife and I both like it, but there's something about the Explorer that holds us back. We like the styling, it's fine. We like the dash styling, it's fine. It's comfortable. Everything about it is okay, but it doesn't excite us and keep us from looking at, say, that Grand Highlander or a Pilot or, heck, a Pathfinder. And the new Traverse, to me, is another nearly home run for GM. I like almost everything about it, except for the fact that they downsized to only one turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. But between the Explorer and the Traverse, the Explorer had some growing pains, and I think they figured out some of it, but I'd buy the Traverse. I absolutely would. I really, really would. And that leaves us with the Tahoe and the Suburban, and I'm not even going to go with the 2025 versions of these. Ford has the Edge. That doesn't really compete with the Tahoe. Tahoe's body-on-frame. Edge more competes with that Blazer, if nothing else, except the Edge is $38.5 starting price. The Blazer is $35. But even there, although the Edge is a much, much older platform, competing against the Blazer, I would go with the Edge. I would give the Edge to the Edge, as it were. I really like the Edge. I think it's underappreciated. I hate that Ford is not updating it on new platforms. I kind of hope that's coming because I really like it, and especially for not needing that third row of seats, I really dig the Edge. So I would give Ford I would give Ford my money here over the Blazer. But for the Tahoe, there's really nothing in Ford's stable that competes with it, which is again kind of a surprise. It wouldn't matter. I mean, Ford would have to come out with something that was absolutely, again, a home run for me to consider it, because I love the new Tahoe. It's ridiculous. There's no reason I would ever need one. But if I dream about cars long enough, I come back to the Tahoe because it does everything you're ever going to need. I really, really dig it. And the same thing here with the Suburban. Man, I love the Suburban. I really do. I think the styling, I think they nailed it on the styling. They managed to make it look substantial without looking ponderously large. It is a huge vehicle, but it looks narrow and tidy. It looks great on the interior. It's a fantastic product. Ford has the Expedition. The Expedition doesn't excite me. Leftover styling, heavy platform. I don't think it rides as well. I don't think it's as nice inside. It might match up in power. Doesn't matter. I would not buy the Expedition, except it's priced more like a Tahoe. So let's move on here to trucks. And what we've got here is, again, we don't have a head-to-head comparison. Ford's got the Maverick, a unibody based on the Escape. Fantastic vehicle, one of my favorites. I've talked about it for years. I still want one. Chevy, go over here to trucks. They've got nothing to compete with it. I suspect they'll bring something here, but it has to go with the Maverick because there's just nothing else out there. It literally is alone in its category. But for the mid-size trucks, you've got the Colorado and the Ranger, and both were recently updated. Now, I think the Ranger improvements are nice. I kind of like the styling. I kind of like the interior. I kind of like everything about it. But there's something about the Ranger that doesn't quite resonate with me. The fact is, I would be happy with either one of these vehicles, and depending on my preference of the day, I could pick one or the other. There are days I trust the Ranger more. But as an overall package, from styling and from interior and just basically everything, I like the Colorado. And in fact, I've really come around to that 2.7 liter engine they're using. That thing is a beast, especially in a vehicle this size. So I would have to give the nod to the Colorado here, except that they have reliability problems. They've been having problems. That might lean me more towards the Ford, but if I just had to say it, the Colorado would be my choice between the two of them. And next comes the Silverado versus the venerable F-150. We like the F-150. For us to go out and just buy a truck and be happy with it and think that it's going to last us for a long time, we trust the F-150. I hear the stories of people who have them and complain about them, but we trust the F-150. My wife loves the F-150. It is her number one truck, and it is my stepson's number one truck. For me, I'm just kind of ambivalent about it. I mean, I'd choose it over a Tundra, I'd choose it over a Titan, but for my money, I'd go with the Silverado. I think interior styling, but not necessarily quality, exterior styling, and just the overall package of it. I would rather drive a Silverado every day than a Ford, than the F-150. That's personal preference. Now, I'm not going to get into the heavy duties. I just don't have enough experience with them, and they're just a little too far out of the everyday consumer. I need to go pick up, a jug of milk, right? But let's talk about the EV trucks real quick. Ford came out with the Lightning. It's been on the market for a while, relatively well received, and they are super, super nice. Silverado has the EV coming out, and well, 6 of one, one half dozen of the other. Which one performs better? Which one's better? My money would be the Ford. I like the Silverado, but there's just some touches around it that I don't like. The styling that works on, say, the Suburban, this narrower face on the Silverado doesn't really work for me. $70,000, $80,000 for the work truck doesn't work for me. And especially this flying buttress they've got back there. It just looks less like truck, more like an Avalanche brought back. And for that, I would go with the Lightning. I just think it's a better overall package. And so we won't really touch on performance vehicles too much. Ford's got this and some not street legal versions of the Mustang. And of course, Chevy's got, let's go to it. Well, they list the Camaro here. I thought it was completely canceled. Excuse me. Still doesn't change anything. Camaro versus Mustang. I'm going to pick the Mustang. Corvette. And there's, to me, those are two different categories, Mustang and Corvette. I mean, the Corvette's got to win here for me. And then finally, we'll end with the electrics. And Chevy's got the Blazer EV, Equinox EV. I think that's going to be pretty cool, but starting from 41.9, what happened to the 30s that I remember talking about, and the Silverado? So when you come over here to Ford, they've got the Mach-E, and of course the Lightning and some other stuff going on. The Maverick is hybrid. The Mach-E is a strong entry, but so if you're just picking purely electric, it would have to be the Mach-E for me. They with the Equinox EV, they, to me, totally missed the pricing on it. They were promising in the 30s, and now it's over 40. The Mach-E has to be it, and I kind of dig it. I kind of like the styling. I'm not somebody who hates the fact that they're using the Mustang name on an electric vehicle, on an electric SUV. I like the interior. I like everything about it, but it ends up being just okay. Just the overall package ends up being just okay. When you look at the Model Y or the Nissan Ariya or any number of other things that are out there, the Mach-E is all style without really giving range or price benefits relative to anything else out there. Between the two brands, I'd pick the Mach-E, but overall, the Mach-E ends up feeling just like an average contender in the market. And so we'll end there, and I want to know what you think, because by my tally, I picked more Chevys than I did Fords. And a number of the Fords that I picked were because Chevy didn't offer a competitor for them. And that's really the most surprising thing out of all of this for me. This little exercise I did for myself is these two guys going head to head, matching each other category to category. They don't anymore in a lot of cases. There's some overlap. There are some direct head-to-heads, but it's surprising to me these two companies have really staked out where they see the market and gone at it in completely different ways. Chevy's being a little more generic SUV, CUV, Ford doing things with a little bit more personality and style. But overall, I think Chevy, I really think they're hitting on a lot of cylinders with their styling. But I still have that question in the back of my mind. So what was your final conclusion? Let me know below, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for being here, guys.